Hi everyone, hope that you all had a wonderful Shabbat and that the studying is going well. Here's another video to help you out. So we're going to talk about the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom. And we spent more of the time on animals than we did on plants. You learned a lot about plants in 6th grade, but what we did talk about was the difference between plants and animals. And one way to really understand what the difference between these two kingdoms is to look inside the cells. So we're looking at our cells, and we know, according to cell theory, that number one, cells are the basic structures of life. Number two, all living things are made up of cells, one or more cells. And number three, all cells are produced from other cells. So cells don't spontaneously exist. Cells divide to form other cells. So that's cell theory, and now we're going to get a close-up look at two kinds of cells, the animal cell and the plant cell. So if we look at the animal cell and the plant cell, we see in the cells there are many different organelles. Organelle means small organ, and like organs in a body, each organelle has its own job to do that helps the cell function. So this picture shows two cells, an animal cell and a plant cell, and it lists all the organelles present in each cell. And we can see that there are many, many organelles that are represented in both cells. And there are a few organelles that plant cells have that animal cells do not have. So if we look at our plant cell right here, we see that there is a wall surrounding the plant cell. That is called the cell wall. It's rigid, it's non-living, and it is like a fence. It protects the cell. That is the job of the cell wall. Animal cells do not have a cell wall. They only have a cell membrane. Plant cells have a cell membrane and a cell wall. Another organelle that is present only in plant cells and not in animal cells are the chloroplasts. So we see chloroplasts throughout this plant cell. The chloroplast is an organelle that contains photosynthesis. Its job is to conduct photosynthesis, where plants make their own food from sunlight. So not all plants do photosynthesis, right? We have onions that are growing underground that would not have chloroplasts. So not all plant cells have chloroplasts, but no animal cells have chloroplasts. And that is a basic underlying difference between animals and plants. Plant cells don't have chloroplasts, which means plant cells have chloroplasts, which means that plants photosynthesize. They can make their own food. Plants are autotrophs. Auto means self. They make food for themselves. Animals, however, are heterotrophs. Heterotrophs means they do not make their own food. They capture their food. They get it from somewhere, but they cannot make it on their own. Animal cells don't have chloroplasts. They don't have that ability. We see there are many organelles that the two cells have in common. If we look at our animal cell, we see this animal cell in particular has a flagellum. Now, not all animal cells have flagellum, only some do. Many animal cells contain flagellum, and our flagellum looks a little bit like a tail. It's a whip-like organelle, and it enables the cell to move. And we notice flagellum on many protists, and that's an animal-like feature that some protists have. And that is also another basic difference between animal cells and plant cells. The animals use sometimes flagellum or other methods to move around. Most animals move, most plants do not move. So those are our basic differences between animals and plants. And now we're going to look in detail at some of the animals we studied over the course of the semester. So the first lab we did was with the wow bug. The wow bug is a small parasitic wasp. And it is a parasite, meaning that it uses a host organism to survive, and it harms that host organism. It doesn't benefit the host. It actually harms the host by either hurting or killing the host. So the parasitic wasps lay their eggs in or on other insects. So the wow bugs that we looked at, they arrived in small containers, and we saw that there were little dark pill-shaped things in the container, and those were the blowfly puparia, because our wow bugs that we looked at, they lay their eggs on the blowfly puparia, and that was their method of survival. So these bugs can't really survive that long or reproduce without a host insect. The scientific name for wow bug is Melitopia digitata. Reviewing, Melitopia is the genus name. Digitata is the species name. So there's several types of Melitopia. There's only one, Melitopia digitata. Our wow bugs hop around. They were really fast. We tried to corral them. Once we corralled them, we made a dry mount slide, which is a slide without water. We used a depression slide. We got the wow bug somehow. Some of you were successful, some of you were not. In the depression slide, we put a cover slip on top. We taped the two together, and we looked at it under the microscope. So once we saw it under the microscope, we were able to look at the structure of the wow bug more clearly, and we were able to see the qualities that are characteristic of its phylum and its class. So wow bugs are in phylum Arthropoda. So if we're remembering from the last video, kingdoms can be classified into phylums. There are 9 main animal phylum. So the animal phylum the wow bug is present in is phylum Arthropoda. Arthropods have 6 legs. No, sorry, insects have 6 legs. Arthropods have exoskeletons and jointed limbs. So there are many other kinds of arthropods that are not insects. We have any crustacean is an arthropod, spiders, arthropods. Okay. Then once we have phylum Arthropoda, the phylum Arthropoda can, like I said, be divided into different classes. So the wow bug is in class Insecta. It's an insect. If we look at the body structure, we see it has 6 legs, 2 antennae, a 3-part body, the head, the abdomen, which is the bottom part, and the thorax, which is the middle part. It also has a compound eye that we were able to view under the microscope. Just on Friday, we looked at the Daphnia, the transparent water flea, which is also an arthropod, but it belongs to class crustacean, so it's more closely related to shrimp and lobsters than it is related to, for example, the wow bug. But it has an exoskeleton, which is an external skeleton. So like bugs, like insects, Daphnia and crustaceans do not have bones inside. They have an exoskeleton that protects the organism. This exoskeleton is non-living. It does not grow with the organism. So while the organism is growing, how does it keep the same exoskeleton? The answer is it doesn't. It molts, it sheds the exoskeleton, and grows a new one. So this Daphnia has a transparent exoskeleton, which makes it a really, really great subject to study in laboratories because you can see the organs of the Daphnia very, very clearly due to its transparent external shell. So if we looked at the Daphnia under the microscope, we could see the heart beating, we could see the brood sac with the eggs, we could see the intestines very, very clearly, which is one of the reasons why Daphnia is studied in science labs, not just for students, but for researchers as well. Daphnia eat protists and bacteria. Another organism that we looked at slides of the budding hydra, but we did not get to see our live hydra yet. We will soon. Hydra are not in phylum Arthropoda. They're in a different phylum. They're in phylum Cnidaria. Cnidaria, some examples of Cnidaria are jellyfish, corals, so we know that the hydra is somewhat related to those other organisms, but it is more closely related to those Cnidaria that are in class Hydrozoa. So Cnidaria have jelly bodies. They have tentacles that they use to paralyze and catch prey. They live in marine environments, so you'll find them in oceans and coral reefs. They have a very simple body structure, especially the hydra. It has one hole for in and out. It has a symmetrical body structure, so if you look at the hydra, there's really not too many organs in the hydra. Very, very simple body structure, and if you split it down the middle, it looks the same on each side. The hydra, we use the hydra to learn about the many different ways that organisms reproduce, because the hydra reproduces in quite a variety of ways. So it reproduces mostly by budding, and again, we drew the budding hydra and we discussed what budding is. Imagine that you have a lump growing on your arm, and then all of a sudden that lump starts to form the shape of a head, and then it starts to grow arms, and then all of a sudden you have another human being hanging off of yourself, which then breaks off and becomes its own organism. That is essentially what budding is. And hydra bud, we discussed that yeast bud. That is the main way that the hydra reproduces, but it also reproduces asexually in another way. It reproduces through fragmentation and regeneration, which means that when the hydra breaks in half, the body parts that have broken off regenerate and become a completely new hydra. So the hydra has an ability to regrow lost body parts. So if you cut the hydra in half, it will regrow the other half of the hydra. So let's talk about animal reproduction in general. So animals, they can reproduce asexually or sexually. Asexually means non-sexual. There's one parent, and the organism reproduced through asexual reproduction has identical DNA to that of the parent. So the offspring in asexual reproduction is essentially a clone of the parent. Looks exactly like the parent because there's only one set of DNA. In sexual reproduction, there is more than one set of DNA. So the new organism is going to have a different genetic makeup than that of the parent. It's going to look different. It's going to have different qualities than the parent. So we talked about the types of asexual reproduction that the hydra do. The hydra bud, they fragment and then regenerate lost body parts. Another type of asexual reproduction is binary fission, which we discussed. Protists reproduce through fission. Binary fission is when the cell splits in two. So protists that are unicellular, that one cell splits into two. It becomes two completely whole organisms. So the hydra doesn't reproduce that way, but it reproduces in two other ways through asexual reproduction: budding and fragmentation / regeneration. The hydra also reproduces sexually. In the fall, it begins to develop sex organs so that it can reproduce sexually, and the eggs will survive the cold winter months. So this is a way that the hydra survives, because when the hydra buds, a benefit to budding is that the hydra doesn't need another organism, and that it happens relatively quickly. But however, the new organism, the offspring, may not survive the colds, but the egg will protect the organism until it hatches. So that is a way that the hydra enables that its offspring will survive. All right, stay tuned for more videos. Again, email any questions that you may have and feel free to comment. Thank you. Have a great day.